Welcome to a very special episode of From the Trenches, the show where myself and my colleague James Boyle bring you behind the scenes at Plan First Wealth and tell you what's going on in the world and in our life and in our business. Hopefully you get some value from it. And this is a very special episode because this is our first in-person podcast.
In person.
Yeah, we
Incredible.
met up.
Yes.
We met up yesterday in New York and overindulged a little bit, perhaps. Feeling it a little bit today.
As you should.
Yes. And it's also extra special because we have Martha Kern with us. For those who don't know, Martha Kern is COO and CCO of Plan First Wealth. She's the longest standing employee. She makes the whole thing tick. James and I do our best to blow it up. Martha keeps us on the straight and narrow. And we're all together in person to gallivant around New York for a couple of days, and we thought we'd do a podcast in person. And here we are. So Martha, introduce yourself.
Well, sure. My name is Martha Kern. I've been in the financial services industry for, it's now actually over 20 years, which I didn't realize until sitting here doing the math right now, which is a bit shocking. By and large, most of that was client facing. And really in the past 3 to 5 years, I've kind of moved from the front of the house to the back of the house, making sure that these guys can meet with clients, do financial planning, manage investments, and then the back end, the compliance, the operations run smoothly, and they don't have to worry about it, and it's handled and it's in good shape.
You still do worry about it.
I know.
You have to worry about
But I do my best.
Yeah, you have to.
I mean, if I wasn't here, I think you'd worry more.
Take a load off my mind. Right, so let's do this. Usual agenda. We'll cover what's going on in the world. We'll have a little look back at the year because this is going out just before Christmas, I think. We'll look forward and then we'll see where this takes us. So,
Excellent.
James, what have you got for us?
Well, we've had an incredible year in the S&P. We use that for shorthand, right? We know that people are in diversified portfolios, but S&P is a useful shorthand. Up 27% on the year. Now, again, as Richard said, this will come out in Christmas. We're recording a couple weeks before, so things may have changed by then. Maybe we'll see a Santa Claus rally here in the last few weeks of the year. But, we ring this bell often about staying invested, not trying to time the market. The S&P is up 70%. From that October 2022 low. 70%.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And if you remember,
it was down about 25 at that point.
I think so. Yes. So the 2022 the year ended about 20% down. It would have been lower in October. Yeah. All the conversations we were having with our clients centered around there's a massive recession coming up. I'm worried. What should I be doing? Should I be going to cash? What's the action here? What's the plan? And it is just, again, this resounding endorsement for the idea of not trying to time the market, not giving in to what is a very valid human emotion. And if you did that, you're up 70%.
Down 2025, up 70.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah,
a lot of volatility, right?
Yeah, I'll take that deal.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. What a year. What another year.
Yep.
But what about next year?
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, half the country thinks everything's going to blow up and go to hell in a handbasket. The other half thinks it's game time.
And some of those people are right and some of those people are wrong, and we haven't figured out which ones are right.
Yeah, we have no idea, but it's going to be interesting.
It will be. I think we're in for more volatility, right? We talk about that inauguration coming up, which will, we'll see what happens economically with policies that have been proposed. We don't tend to make predictions or have price targets or an outlook. Obviously, we have the message of staying the course. I alluded to this idea of a Santa Claus rally. I'll just dive into that. So Callie Cox over at the Ritholtz Group, we quote a lot, put out a great article about what the Santa Claus rally is. It's the idea that at the end of the year, there tends to be a fairly significant rise in prices from the last 5 trading days of the year. So it's the final 3 days of the calendar year and then the first 2 trading days of the new year.
Okay.
Oh, right. So it really is right at the very end.
Yes, very end. And it actually bridges that gap, which I never knew, the idea of the rally. So I'm just going to read the stat here. The S&P 500 has risen in the last 5 trading days of the year through the first 2 trading days of the following year about 80% of the time. So that's a fairly statistically significant stat there. Usual 7-day period, it's up about 59%. So a pretty big bump. Like I said, we've had a great year, 2024, up 27%. In years when the S&P has been up 20% or more through November, the index also rose in December 75% of the time. Okay. Now, that sounds incredible, but normal stat is probability of a rally in December is 74%.
Okay.
So probably not statistically significant. But we could see that there's an argument to be made that we have seen all the growth that the market is prepared to accept for the year. That could turn out to be true as well.
Is there a reason behind that? Is it, good market sentiment at the end of the year? Is it, the retail boom that just happens over the holidays? I'm just speculating because I have no idea.
Those are two of the topics you'll hear talked about frequently. There's also some idea about mutual fund managers and sort of, fund managers looking to capitalize on what was a good year and squeeze out any kind of returns that they can at the end of the year. Retail activity, people are out and spending money. I just saw something, it was a quick headline that said they expect 2024 holiday season to be 14% more sales, net sales for the year. So as it stands, the economy feels like it's still strong. People are working. And as we know, if people are working, they're going to be spending.
Yeah,
so.
And Black Friday hit records this year.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's sort of expanded as well, right?
It's so many days now. It's not just Black Friday.
Yeah, it's
Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Charitable Giving Tuesday.
It's like a 2-week, vacation for spending. But all that activity, begets a lot of economic confidence again going into the new year.
The economy is humming.
Yeah.
It is humming.
Yeah.
It's remarkable, really.
Yep.
It really is. And it's also remarkable given how many people think it's not.
Right. The vibes check, as the kids say.
Vibe session.
Vibe session. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been a pretty wild year, really. It's been elections everywhere. Incumbents have been deposed globally, including in the good old US of A. And I think it's just worth touching on what I said before. Like, half the country really does think that we're about to implode, and the other half thinks it's game time. And whichever side of that you're on, you're probably wrong, because no one has a clue. And I just temper it, whether you're scared stiff that people in a position of fear are liable to make a wrong move, but also if you're overconfident, that can also lead to making a wrong move. So we just caution: calm and steady. Slow and steady wins the race. Stick with your plan. Stay invested. Keep doing what you've always done. Try and tune out the noise, and this too shall pass.
Yep.
I would guess that part of the reason that most of those people are wrong also is because of the number of scenarios in the middle. Some of the policies are going to be positive economically. Some of them are not. Some of them will be rolled out at the same time and will maybe even have a neutralizing effect. But the number of scenarios that are both bad and good are much higher than just, oh my gosh, everything's amazing, or oh my gosh, we're crashing into the river.
Yeah. One commentator referred to the coming 4 years. I think it was Yardini, so a legit commentator. We could be in for an economic lollapalooza.
Lollapalooza. That's a great word.
Constantly. So, yeah.
It's probably worth just mentioning that the Fed is meeting this week. We'll get a decision on rate cuts or potentially pausing. We do get the CPI tomorrow morning.
It's creeping up, right?
It is, yeah. Wow. So that to me, sentiment feels like they may pause this meeting and then revisit in the new year. We'll see what happens, right? I think the CPI will be demonstrative tomorrow if they're going to actually cut again or not. But we're in this sort of downward trajectory. Inflation has come down very significantly over the last year, so I don't see any major reasons to worry or panic right now.
We need prices to come down.
Yeah.
I know it's not going to happen, but I think everyone wants prices to come down.
Yes.
It is expensive, and we're in New York where it is particularly expensive.
I was just going to say, we had a tour of the Met yesterday, which was great, excellent. There was a lot of students there.
Yeah.
Martha, I'm sure you noticed that. Teenagers. I saw a kid in front of us get a sandwich and a soda, and it was like $24. And I thought, well, it's an expensive education at the Met here, well worth it. But prices are.
What a place, the Met, eh?
Beautiful.
You spend
beautiful
all time. You could just lose yourself forever in there.
Yep.
Anything else to say about this year? So we obviously had the elections. We've had another year of hurricanes and climate disasters. That is going to be a feature, I think, for the foreseeable. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Florida handles this.
Tell me about it.
Particularly, the barrier islands. I saw someone bought a $20 million house on a barrier island the other day. I'm like, really? Are you buying property on barrier islands now? Like, did you not just see what happened this year? I guess when you got that much money, you've got other properties to go to, but still. It's going to be interesting to see how we're going to have to adapt. There's going to be more floods. There's going to be more fires.
We had a period, so we're in the Northeast, Connecticut, Philadelphia. We had, I think it was something like 38, 39 straight days, no rain in the fall, which is very odd for this area, for this time of year. But yeah, I think we'll just have to see what happens.
When I was thinking about this episode, I can only remember the election.
Yeah,
it's like, it's like crowded everything else out.
It's a lot can happen, and obviously things are top of mind for everyone given November, but I know from a business perspective, we have a lot to be excited for next year in 2025. Our clients, there have been some jitters here and there, but certainly I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. We're going to talk a little bit about Virginia's episode in a few minutes, but she had a turn of phrase that I really enjoyed. Hope springs eternal. That could be the mantra of 2025 for us. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for this coming year. All right, so should we talk about the last two episodes?
Yeah.
We had Misty Kimbrough on to talk about Medicare and pre-retirement healthcare, and then we had Virginia to talk about reasonable cause. So let's start with Misty. So Medicare. Wow.
Complicated.
Really complicated.
Really complicated.
Really complicated. And what I took from that is, I think a lot of people just get to Medicare age and think, "Oh, right, that's it, sorted." That's I don't need to think about anything else, and you really do. If you're on just original Medicare, you're on the hook for 20% of the costs, 20% copay, no cap. And you're going into retirement, you're likely to have procedures and hospital stays, and that can get very expensive very quickly.
Yep.
So it's complicated. It's ever changing. That's another thing I took. It changes every single year. But there are solutions, and you need to give it some real thought. You need to make sure you're covered in retirement,
and ideally working with someone who's knowledgeable in that area. It's something we build in the plans and we're looking at, but we're not signing people up to Medigap plans and supplemental plans and things. I think there's a lot of value of having someone who is steeped in that world and can help you navigate. It's also very state dependent as well, right? Which people don't realize. So it can vary depending if you're in Florida or Maine or Texas or California. It's an easy area to overlook, I think. Rich, you have a good point there. So navigating and knowing your options is very important and provides a lot of peace of mind, right?
Yeah. And I think there's no downside to getting help. The way that the industry works, and when Misty talked about it, nobody's paying her a flat fee. If you go at it alone or if you go at it with her, you're going to pay the same for the insurance plan you end up, whatever that specific plan details are. But there's not an extra cost to get advice. So get advice, get help, get someone who knows the landscape. And frankly, you might need it more than once. Your medical needs change. Your prescription that you're taking on a regular basis changes. So use the people who are in the industry and get the best information. Let them do the work for you so you don't have to.
I got the impression it was an annual thing. Like you really
I
review
think so.
annually.
I think you're right.
The drugs change, what's on the list changes, and you got to constantly be on top of it. And did you, when she was talking about the pre-retirement healthcare, because this is something we come across a lot. Europeans often just think, I want to retire early, I'll retire at 55, 60.
Yeah.
And we don't think about healthcare in the same way in the UK and Europe. And then when they come and sit down with us, we're like, oh yeah, have you factored in 15 grand a year for healthcare? They're like, no. And for that conversation, I think that's about 12 to 15 grand.
For a couple, it could be 24. It could be $2,000 a month.
Each.
Easily.
Yes.
Did you hear?
Yes.
Did you remember the story? Someone was diagnosed with lung cancer and wasn't covered. There was a gap in their insurance. They just hadn't taken it out. That is
Terrible.
awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
You can't have a gap.
No.
You
So you have to figure out how to patch it together.
I don't know how people let themselves get into that situation. But it made me chuckle when she said to people, I don't plan on getting sick. Like, this is why.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah, right. This is why we're needed, because we get in front of people and we're like, you can't have that mentality, you can't have that approach. It's like when we're doing financial planning and we project someone living to 95 or 99, like, I'm not going to live that long.
Yep.
I don't think that's how it works. And I tell you what, when you're 90 years old and you've got money left, you'll be thanking us.
Yeah. There's this idea, I'm sure we've talked about it before on the podcast, of the retirement smile. right? And it usually is focused, in part at least, on medical spending, healthcare spending. The idea, in short, is that early part of your retirement, you're active, you're still healthy, you're traveling, your go-go years, exactly. You're taking trips and you're doing all those things you waited for while you were working. That tends to trickle off a bit. You reach your 70s, late 70s, maybe early 80s. You're not as healthy. You're slow go. Your spending starts to drop a bit.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we know that can be a pretty temporary period because later on in life, now all of a sudden you have these medical charges that make up for it. And Richard, to your point, if you get to that 85, 86 years old, and your spending on medical starts to skyrocket, you will be very thankful that you had a plan in place that acknowledged
for the no-go years.
Exactly. You do not want to be the no-go years. You do not want to be planning on that not happening, right? So that's important.
I really like that the framework Martha's putting on it there, the way people should think about their retirement. What was it? Go, slow go,
no-go. In terms of that, what are you doing? How much are you doing in retirement? What is your travel? What is your social activities? What's your leisure? High in the middle, low, maybe potentially not at all at the end, but that's when the healthcare expenses pick back up. That's the other end of the smile.
I don't think people realize just what an opportunity they have when they retire. Yeah. Especially now we're retiring at 65. You've got 10, 15 years of hopefully robust health. They could be the best years of your life. That might be the one time you have the trifecta of health, wealth, and time. And you're only going to get one shot at this. And you don't know when your health's going to give out. Hopefully it won't, but you don't know. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And I really want people to make the most of those go-go years. Yeah. They could be, if you spent 40 years working, saving, particularly expats, you've moved away from your family, you've raised your kids, you've sent them off into the world. Yeah. What an opportunity.
Yep.
That 10-year, do it all.
Yeah.
Do it all.
I remember hearing a speaker or a trainer in my previous job, and we were talking about life expectancy and how we're adding to that, and it's getting longer. And the comment was, you're not adding the best years of your health. The years that you're adding on, you're tacking on at the end. It's 95 or 98 or 100. Those aren't your best health years. Your best health years are always going to be that first portion, that when you're immediately retired.
Yeah. Make the most of it, people.
Absolutely. I'm grateful that the people we work with are globally mobile. They're adventurous. They have plans in place, and if they don't, those are the conversations we love. I won't speak for you, Richard, but that's the really rewarding stuff because in those last few years, call it the pre-retirement, the red zone.
Yeah.
Really sketching out a detailed plan of what do I want this next phase to look like. Everyone says travel, right? That's number one. But what does that mean? Where are you going to be spending time? How long? Are you taking cruises? Are you flying? Are you slow traveling? Is it an RV?
Are you taking the whole family?
The whole family, exactly. Are you seeing grandkids? I mean, those little details that are the fun bits of planning, right, and financial planning, and could be argued is even more meaningful than the math and the boring stuff that we have to also look at.
Right, let's talk about Virginia and reasonable cause. So I had Virginia on because she's a fantastic tax attorney for a start. She's very big in the international market. She has this widely read tax blog that is just a wealth of information. But I particularly wanted her to come on to talk about reasonable cause, right? Because this is when the IRS asserts penalties. And the people we work with, expats, are at risk of penalties because penalties can get applied for underreporting income. And oftentimes expats might have unwittingly underreported income, but also for not filing information returns on your non-US assets. Catches so many people out. And in the US, they don't mess around with these penalties. This is not HMRC's £100 slap on the wrist. This is starting at 10 grand a pop. I think that's even more now when you factor in inflation. And I think people have an understandable but very naive idea of what happens when they get a penalty, and they can just call up the IRS and be like, "Oh, sorry guys, I didn't know," and the IRS will abate it. And that is not how it works at all. You have to, hopefully you can assert what's called reasonable cause, and it's a standard, it's a legal standard that you had literally reasonable cause for the mistake that you made, and if you can demonstrate reasonable cause, they will hopefully abate your penalties. But it's a process. Again, you don't just call them up and assert it. Yeah, and you can, you could write a couple of sentences, but really it's a proper, written document that goes into great detail about how you ended up, how that you made this mistake. And to do this properly, I think I would always use the services of a tax attorney who's got experience with it. That's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money, thousands of dollars to do it properly, and it's going to cost you an awful lot of stress.
Yeah, a massive headache. What struck me in part was just that level of detail, the robustness required, a timeline of activity. When did you speak to your tax advisor? When did you file X, Y, and Z? What was your mindset? What were you thinking? Why did you miss this? It's not, like you say, an informal sort of, hey, put my hands up. I didn't plan to get sick. I didn't plan to be in compliance. That doesn't work, right? You have to have the services of an attorney, and really, it's almost a defense, right? I mean, it's
100%.
It's a timeline of, here's the missteps we made. Here's what we try to do to correct it. She used a term, and I might be fudging it here. Was it ordinary business prudence?
Ordinary business care and prudence, something
Care
like
and
that.
prudence, right. And the idea is that you took all the necessary or reasonable steps to try to do things the right way. And it seems like it's a fairly high level of, it's a threshold that's fairly high.
I mean, she gave an example, a real life example, where someone with non-US businesses had not been filing 5471, but they had their tax advisor had advised them as such, and the IRS initially rejected that. So this person then had to go and fight this. More money, more time, more stress.
Yep. And the penalty has to be paid first. That was another.
It depends.
Okay.
So I think it's a 35-20 penalty. Okay. I can't remember which one. Some of them you can they get assessed, and then you can enter into a dialogue with the IRS before you pay it. Some of them, though, and I think it's 35-20, but I'm not entirely sure, you have to pay it up front.
Then you have to sue, basically, to try to get it back.
There does seem to be a sentiment of presumed guilty and having to prove your innocence. It seems like you're always at this position of deficit where you have to go, it's not just prove it, you're not assumed that you're starting out innocent. You're assumed to do something wrong, and you have to unwind that and prove, reasonably that you didn't know or that you should not have known.
And then there's the 3-part test for if you use a tax advisor. And actually, no, I want to make something very clear here. There is a world of difference between having a tax preparer and a tax advisor. And what we see is 9 times out of 10, our clients, people who come to us, have tax preparers. This is someone who's just filling out the forms and not giving them proactive, strategic tax advice. But when you do have a paid tax preparer or a tax advisor, there's a 3-part test to establishing reasonable cause. The first one is, do they have the relevant knowledge and experience? So for us, it would be, does your tax advisor have experience and knowledge in international matters? And again, 9 times out of 10, our clients are going to someone local and they don't have that experience. Therefore, can you say reasonable cause? If you're not filing these forms and you say, I use a tax advisor, does your tax advisor have any experience in international matters? Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Well, I think that would qualify, by my standard, but it might not meet the IRS's test. Your tax preparer doesn't have the knowledge, the relevant experience and knowledge. But then if you do want a cross-border person, that's going to cost a bit more money.
Yep.
I think it's a price worth paying, but it is going to cost a bit more money.
It's the idea of mitigating, preventing, not being reactive to something, but being proactive and getting out in front of it. And we'll keep ringing that bell for sure. If you've been listening to this podcast, I'm sure we've made this point many times, but I want to just circle back to something you said, Richard, which is this idea of informational reporting, which doesn't necessarily mean that there was even tax due, right? It could be as simple as disclosing a foreign account. And there are cases, I think you mentioned this in the episode, where people just say, I haven't taken any income for that. I haven't taken any distribution. So I didn't tell my tax advisor. I didn't even bother to tell them I have this pension or this account. And that's not a good excuse, right? I mean, there's now we know that the proper way to go about it is to be proactive and to address these things if you find that, you haven't disclosed all that you needed to. And that's a very common misconception, right? This idea of, I haven't taken any money out. Why should I disclose?
Yeah, we get that all the time. There's no tax was due. I don't have to report it. Here, you do. You do. Maybe on more than one form as well. So back to that 3-part test. So the first part is, does your tax advisor who you relied on for this, do they have cross-border experience and expertise? Okay, yes or no. The second test is, did you tell them? Because we've had it with clients before where we found out, they haven't been filing they haven't been doing the informational return for their pensions. And when we ask them, do you have a tax advisor? And the answer is yes. And then we say, well, what? How come? They say, well, I didn't tell them about it. I didn't because there's no tax was due. So again, under that, the IRS's test, you can't really rely on reasonable cause if you didn't tell the tax advisor about it. And then there are some grey areas because often a tax advisor will give you an organizer, and people misconstrue what's meant by foreign financial assets. Does it include pensions or this sort of stuff? Does it just mean bank accounts? So there can be some grey area then. And then the third part is, did you rely on the advice? So if you take advice and the person tells you to file it and you don't, well, obviously you can't rely on reasonable cause. So once you break it down, the 3-part test makes sense to me. But I fear there are landmines in there that can trip people up. Well-meaning people, people who aren't hiding anything.
Right. No malicious intent. It's just an oversight that should be corrected.
Well, I feel like so many areas of this of international taxes, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't even know that this can be an issue, you're not even going to ask the question. And this happens with the client, but it also happens with the tax preparer. This is how this sort of thing, a gift, is dealt with in the U.S. Oh, I'm assuming that it's going to be the same way if it's international. Well, no. And if you don't have experience in international affairs, you're not going to know that it's going to be treated differently if it's foreign versus if it's U.S. And that's the problem. If they don't have the experience, they could give you a very confident answer that's based on tax law, but it's based on the wrong tax law. So if you don't know that you don't know, you don't even know to ask the question. You don't know something's going to be an issue or has a variant that is going to be treated differently. And you're starting at a disadvantage if the expert doesn't have that experience.
It's a good point. And you see it on the client side too. I think it's almost insidious in a way. And it's many times our clients are coming from a country that treats taxes much differently than the U.S., right? We know the U.S. is idiosyncratic and sort of unique in the way it
complicated.
Yeah, very complicated.
So complicated.
So if you're entering the country, that's your frame of reference. Like that's how you're approaching this. And it's not, again, not this malicious intent or anything, but you have one frame of reference and the IRS usually has a very different one, right? So you try not to let that color how you approach these things or address them. It's a problem for a lot of them.
She also said it makes a difference whether you've been here 2 years or 20 years.
That was interesting.
If 2 years, you can say, I'm brand new, I don't know. 20 years,
Doesn't fly anymore.
By now?
Yeah. It just doesn't fly.
Should you know by now?
Yeah, the level of detail that she was sharing that they will look at. I mean, it is a full-on investigation, and every aspect of your profile, who you are, how you've approached this is examined and investigated.
But we're talking serious money for the penalties, like 10 grand per form per year. I think it's much more than inflation. I think that $10,000 number was set, year like 2010 or something. So it's much, much higher now. And this is all for what I call innocent non-compliance. You're not non-purposeful. You're not trying to hide anything. But if you are doing that, that's a whole different ball game.
That's a different podcast altogether.
Whole different ball game.
Yeah,
you don't want to be going there. So I thought it's super interesting. I want people to understand that there's much, much more into it than just a phone call. Sorry guys, I didn't know. That's not going to fly. So as I said a million times, it's better to prepare than it is to repair. And you've got to try and we want people to be in compliance, so they don't have to go through these trials and tribulations. That's just one of them. Reasonable call. I'm going to have it back on. I'm going to talk about statute of limitations. People don't realize when you don't file these forms that potentially it leaves your tax return open indefinitely. You don't have the 3 or 6 year statute of limitations.
I think she mentions a specific case, where it was many years later, and those years are all open, right? That's the term they use, and that literally means if that spotlight comes down on you and they find any other issues in any of those years, which if there are already issues that need to be addressed, chances are there could be something else where there's smoke, there's fire, but that's scary, right? That's a sort of scary prospect. And part of the reason of doing this podcast is to get this information out there and share resources that can be of great help.
On that note, if we just kind of start thinking about like reviewing the year in this podcast, we've started to hear from people, and people are taking action based on this podcast, which is pretty gratifying.
Yes, absolutely.
I've met with someone who has taken proactive steps and as a result has dodged really common landmines that people move to the US and basically have undetonated, lurking there. But because he's listened to this, he's taken steps, and he's just saved himself a massive headache and possibly quite a lot of money as well. And we're hearing people are reaching out or asking questions, and which we love. So please, you want us to talk about anything? If you want us to have a certain guest on, topics, questions, just send them in, and we'll see what we can do.
Don't be shy. We love the feedback.
But I think that's an incredible point. The Ask an Expert podcast, it's not to teach you how to do your tax returns and to identify your own errors and, try to be in compliance, create your own compliance when you've been out of compliance. It's just to say, hey, this is a red flag. This is an issue. You might want to do more. You might want to ask a question. You might want to do some research. And if we can have that as a positive effect, that's incredible.
Yeah. It's really gratifying. It's really gratifying. Because I enjoy this. So there's going to be more podcasts coming next year because I quite enjoy it. Today's a bit of a struggle, honestly, because of our adventures last night and my 5 a.m. wake-up call from my 2-year-old this morning. But we enjoy it, and I enjoy it because I actually feel that my knowledge base is expanding, and I hope it is for you guys listening as well. So we're getting better as a company, and I'm meeting some really good people as well, and strengthening relationships. And I've done this for 10 years in the US now. I realise that my network is incredibly valuable. Just knowing who to go to with certain problems and having a good relationship there initially, already in place, is worth a lot of money. So
that is a key point, I think, because very often what we find has happened in the past is a client or a prospective client says, oh, I heard of that, and I started looking into it, and I didn't know who to go to, and I couldn't understand it, so I just let it go. And if you can find the right professional or network of professionals, that can make a huge difference, because then it's not just you and Google and trying to go at your own. And to your point, Martha, earlier about working with the right professionals, if you have someone that has a network that we can leverage and use those resources and apply them where it's needed, that's enormously valuable.
I had the exact same thought, that analysis paralysis. Like, I think there's something fishy going on, but I don't even know where to start. And if you start Googling tax topics, you're just going to get buried, and you might very well just shut down. I mean, I'm sure I've done that on occasion. But if you mention it to your advisor and they say, oh, wait, I've got a person for that, or I can narrow that down for you and point you in the right direction, it just brings light into the room. It just allows you to take another step and not just be guessing.
We've had a good year at Plan First Wealth. A lot behind the scenes, like putting in some foundations. We changed custodians. We brought some more investment tools and sophistications and a layer of tax optimization over the top of it. So we were really excited to roll that out earlier this year. We're hoping to finish the year with texting, which, anyone listening is like, what? So this is not 2002, but it's in financial service, in what we do, everything has to be recorded. Texting is it's quite the operation to add it, and we're very close. So hopefully we'll have the option to text by the end of the year. Lots planned for next year: podcast, business, proposition, more tax tools, more investment tools, more planning stuff, really. That's what we're all about, Plan First Well, helping people lead better, more fulfilling lives, make the most of that trifecta, health, wealth, and time. Best years of your life, hopefully. We want that. We want to make that come true for people. So, exciting times. Good year, and excited for next year. I'm about as excited as I've been since I set the firm up, I think. Yeah. I said to you last night, like, when I set the firm up, I was excited, but I was also kind of terrified.
Yeah.
It's a scary leap.
Yeah, definitely. Whereas I'm less terrified now and just quite excited because I've got the right people on the bus as well. So exciting times. Personally, I've had an interesting year. I ruptured my Achilles at the very, very start of summer. I was going to make a triumphal return to golf this summer while my kid was at camp, and that didn't happen. And my 2-year-old recently had his adenoids and tonsils out. And the recovery from that has been brutal. Just like we are operating on no sleep. Yeah. So I don't even know, it kind of chokes off your breathing. And he was waking up like 10 times an hour, apparently, did a sleep study. And, we were like 5 or 6 weeks post-surgery now. And you can almost, on a daily basis, see a change in him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable.
If you're not getting sleep, that is brutal, right? And at 2, you don't have the the ability to explain or give some context for how you're feeling. I can't imagine you waking up 10 times in an hour and trying to get through the next
stunts
day.
your growth.
Yeah,
Stunts your growth.
Yeah. Do they have a timeline for sort of full recovery? I'm sure it takes.
I actually don't know. I know 2 to 3 weeks was like the really hard time. Constant pain meds. He was in a lot of pain, and now he's just he's not in any discomfort or pain. He just wakes up a lot and comes in our room now. And
Well, he hasn't had regular sleep. Like his body doesn't know what a normal sleep looks like, and probably needs to figure that out. There's no routine to go back to. He's got to form a new one.
Yeah, so it's a wild time. Well, it's my wife and I. No family here, obviously. We both work. 2 kids under 5 and a dog. It's
And a business.
And a business. Yeah. It's great fun. It's complete mayhem. It's exhausting.
But you wouldn't have it any other way.
No. Everyone's doing well, which is the main thing. Everyone's doing well. Anything else to add from year in review or looking forward?
No, I think the feedback is excellent. It's very gratifying. We encourage you if you have any questions or if you enjoyed a guest and like to see them back, or if you have someone in your network that you think would be a benefit, reach out to us. You have all our email addresses: James at Plan First Wealth, Richard at Plan First Wealth. We also have info at Plan First Wealth that we all will see. And so keep them coming. It really is encouraging, and I'm glad to see it's finding an audience.
Yeah, good.
We're enjoying it.
Good. Right, should we do a show and tell?
Yeah, pick a mix.
Pick and mix. Is that what we call it? I can never remember.
I don't know. I threw that out because I hear it on the British podcast I listen to.
So over the weekend we watched The Apprentice. Have you seen the movie about Trump?
I've heard of it. Yes, he's a good actor.
He's really
Great
good.
Actor. Yeah.
He played Tommy Lee, in the Pamela Anderson.
Yes.
He's good as that, and he's really good as Trump. And you've got Kendall Roy from Succession.
He's excellent.
Yes.
He's very good. He's playing Roy Cohn. Do you know Roy Cohn? Have you heard of the lawyer, famous?
No.
Oh, you need to go and watch the documentary about Roy Cohn. He was like Trump's fixer, and he taught Trump to a way to operate, and you see that today. But he's a very interesting, slightly terrifying character, and you should definitely go and learn about Roy Cohn. You will find him fascinating and kind of terrifying.
Yeah. It's sort of deeply unsettling.
Yeah. So that we just watched that at the weekend, and we really enjoyed it. It was good. It was really good.
Is it streaming on something or?
I'd have to ask Kate.
Maybe, yeah. Did you ever finish the what was the Jake Gyllenhaal one where he's the
presumed innocent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
That was good, right?
Yeah, that was good. I'm reading The Power Broker, which is shaping up to be a simply astounding book. You understand? I think it won the Pulitzer Prize. It's like 50 years old. And he's writing about stuff in the 30s, and which seems to us forever ago. And you realise that we're further away from when he wrote this book.
Oh wow! Yeah.
It's fantastic. It is. Get it on your Kindle.
I was going to say you got the ebook.
I got it on the ebook
because for a long time it wasn't available.
It's so big.
Visually. Yeah.
It's so big.
Yeah.
I think I'm like 25% way through. I've been reading it for ages. But my book of the year was this Life and Fate, the Russian book about Stalingrad and basically a commentary on Soviet Russia. Life and Fate was a spectacular book.
I had to check that out. That one you are done. You finished that one.
I have finished that one. Yeah.
Was that another doorstopper? Like
Yeah. And it's obviously it's a translation.
Oh right.
So you got to be careful when you read translations. You got to. Well, I think I enjoyed it. Let's put it that way. And podcasts, I've got 2 recommendations for podcasts. Well, so first of all, Compound and Friends, we listen to that week in, week out, right? It's fantastic. And Pivot. But British listeners might be familiar with a guy called Dan Snow, son of Jon Snow, not Game of Thrones Jon Snow, but Channel 4 news.
The Prince Who Was Promised, was that? Or?
You know nothing, Jon Snow. You know nothing. And he's a TV history guy. But he's got this podcast called Dan Snow's History Hit. I've been listening to it for a long, long time, and he's actually got a whole media platform of like documentaries. Wow. It's great. But it's a wonderful kind of podcast that goes in. Some episodes are 20 minutes, some are 45 minutes, and it's all sorts of history. But then from that has spawned specialist podcasts. So there's the one on the Ancients, which is a History Hit podcast. There's one on the Tudors, not just the Tudors, but all that time. And now the one that I'm currently latched onto is American history hit. So I'm going deep into American history, and it's so anyone who's interested in history, there is the History Hit itself is a fantastic podcast, and it has spawned some fantastic podcasts if you have a particular area of that you enjoy. And another one, the last one is there's a podcast called Slow Burn. They pick a topic every once in a while and then go deep on it, slow burn. And one of the earlier. It's on season 10 now. That's what I've just listened to. It's about the rise of Fox News. Very interesting.
I bet.
Very interesting.
I can imagine.
Again, slightly terrifying, but very interesting. And one of the earlier seasons is about Biggie and Tupac. So as someone who was very into that,
Excellent.
yeah, I learned so much. It was so interesting. Then there's one on the rise of David Duke, also very interesting. So Slow Burn, check it out. History Hit and its siblings.
Do they have guests on, or do they? How do they?
Slow Burn.
Yeah.
It's like there's one guy who is a journalist who mainly narrates, but then they'll sometimes have guests on, or it's more like interviews. They'll have snippets and so on.
Okay.
Not, or different people might be on. It's not like this where we sat around a table kind of thing. It's like a
because is History Hit the same way? Is it
History Hit?
Him?
No, History Hit. Occasionally, Dan Snow will, if it's a topic he wants to do, he'll just it'll be him talking. But most of the time, he brings a guest on. Someone's got a book or got a documentary out. That kind of thing.
There was a podcast, I think it's called Hardcore History, Dan Carlin, and it was just him presenting. He was great at it, but I found that it was harder to stay engaged when it's just one person, lecturing to a microphone. So I like when they have guests.
That is a hard thing to do.
Very
when
hard.
you're doing the prep that goes into, these people, they script this stuff out. Like, they don't just sit down and start waffling into the mic. It's a lot of work goes into it.
It reminds me of you hear stories about recording audiobooks. That's apparently very difficult too.
Yeah. I can imagine.
It's very hard. Yeah.
All right, that's me done. What have you got for us?
Well, I think I figured out yesterday I needed something for pick and mix. So instead of many categories, I'll just share one. I have to confess, I don't really listen to podcasts much, except for this one.
Yes, that's the right answer.
But I read a lot of fiction, and one of the standouts this year that I've been recommending to anyone who will take my recommendation is a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Oh, yeah. This has been like 20 years.
It's not a new, 10 or 15 years old perhaps, and it's written from the point of view of an autistic teenager who comes across a dead dog in his neighborhood, and he decides he wants to investigate and figure out what happened. And the storytelling is very interesting and different. It's a point of view that I wasn't used to seeing. It kind of gave you this extra understanding behind the scenes of what can happen in an autistic mind, and how someone who has that condition is dealing with and interacting with the world, and even can even explain things you've experienced when interacting with someone, like, well, why did they do that, or why was this different, or why is this sort of situation really challenging for them. So I really liked it. It was just really different storytelling, and it was a quick read. It was one of those you just couldn't put down. You kept wanting to know what happened, and the story itself was really good. What happened to the dog and all the things that the gentleman discovers during the course of the book. So I strongly recommend.
I haven't read it, but you always see that pop up on top 100 of the 21st century or 20th century. That's excellent.
You don't listen to podcasts. I just listen to podcasts constantly.
I listen to too many.
I love them, yeah.
Yeah. I have been on, and I think I talked about this author before, maybe on this podcast, a guy named Eric Larson.
Oh, yeah, great, fantastic author.
I only just learned that the genre is usually referred to as narrative nonfiction.
Yeah.
So it's like nonfiction works, but it almost reads like a novel.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Incredibly engaging, super good.
Did he do a Churchill book?
He did.
Yeah,
so I read that one around this time last year, called The Splendid and the Vile.
Yes, 5 days.
I think it was 1 year. Yeah,
okay,
I think it was 1 year in Churchill's life. I just read...
That ends with Roosevelt coming into the war.
Yes. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it gives you a good insight into...
Winston liked to drink, didn't he?
He was
champagne and brandy.
And he was a bath guy. He would take 4 baths a day with scotch or whatever it was.
He was a character, wasn't he?
He would dictate to his secretary. So he would be in the bath and have a drink.
That's uncomfortable.
And he would just he'd be shouting out, this.
You wouldn't be getting away with that in the Me Too era, would you?
No, absolutely not.
I hope not.
Rightly so.
Okay, let's make that clear.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not lamenting that fact.
So I actually read 3 more by him recently.
Have you read the Lusitania?
Yeah, so that one,
Is that
Dead
good?
Wake, probably his best. And I enjoy
haven't read
all
that
of them.
one.
It is fantastic.
Okay.
It goes almost on a minute-by-minute recounting of the journey of the Lusitania and eventually the sinking of it. As part of World War I.
Oh, right,
you learn a ton. He kind of like profiles, 10 or 12 passengers on board, and you really get to see. I mean, just the story of like the German government had put an ad in the newspaper the week before and said, "Do not travel on this."
No.
Really?
Yes. It was like almost. He doesn't quite delve into was there an open conspiracy, because there's a lot about in the UK. There was this, I think it was called Room 40, and they were code breakers, and no one outside of this 10 or 12 people in this room knew anything about what they had, the intel they had. So, is it possible? Did they know something was going to happen? Potentially. But, the German government was shouting it from the rooftops, essentially. And just, a mix of hubris and it won't happen to me. And they set sail. Happened right off.
Getting on a boat.
I know.
And knowing that the government, that you're not at war at this point, right? But they are sinking ships.
They're not at war, but they're sinking ships. Yeah.
And that's just breathtakingly dumb.
Yes. And there were passengers that decided, a handful, surprisingly less than you'd think, or fewer than you'd think, that decided the day before or the morning of, I'm not getting on this ship, whether it's intuition or what. There were people who had meant to be on the Titanic and wound up being on the Lusitania.
Oh, wow.
There was a ship that got docked. There was some mechanical issue, and there was like 30 or 40 people on that ship. They moved them to the Lusitania, so that was unfortunate. Just an incredible retelling. Again, very engaging, fast read. Happened 10 miles off the coast of Ireland, which I didn't realize, a town called Kinsale, which I've been to. Beautiful sunny day, and just sunk in like 17 minutes.
17 minutes.
Rapid sinking.
Okay, so when in 3 years when I finish the Power Broker, I know what I'm reading next.
There you go.
So my 5-year-old is starting to read and write, and I'm so excited for him because reading it's just amazing. It just opens up. You just said it. It just opens up this whole world.
Yeah.
And I'm already get the vibes that he's going to love it. I think both of them, because Kate and I read a lot, so I think they see that. But it's really exciting to just this unlock that's gonna come for him. And it's cool to see.
I think it's important. I mean, he's 5. That's a great age too to get it. Because that's, if you enjoy reading and it's something you do, you always have that, right? It's almost meditative, and you can go away from the world for a bit and learn and. It's just...
You can read about anything.
There's so many books.
Anything else?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, right. Well, this has been odd, hasn't it?
Yeah.
In person. We're a fully remote firm.
Yep.
We're remote from each other. All our clients are spread out across the US. So it's great when we get together. But all the podcasts we've ever done have been remote. I've never done an in-person one.
And we want to do this more often. I think, right? As an idea.
Yeah.
It's always good to see you guys, and I think there's something to the energy in a room when you're together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to everyone listening. We're going to be doing much more of this. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate your input. We hope you find them valuable. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great holiday season. Take some time to reflect, and I hope our listeners are as excited for 2025 as we are.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Ciao.